So before we get started, we'll just do a round of introductions. So I'm Yannick. I am a senior consultant at Mutual Ventures. I've also been working closely with the Wolverhampton DFJ area throughout the programme. And I've also been the lead for the learning programme, of which this event is a part, and really any of the things that we've kind of produced in the sessions that we've run throughout the Trailblazers project, where we've sort of shared insights and shared learning with the wider sector or between Trailblazers. All of that comes under the learning programme. So you may have been to previous events already. I'll just ask my colleagues to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the region that they are working in. Jenny, I'll start with you.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Jenny Blake, and I'm the strategic social worker for the Guildford DFJ area. My main role has been workforce development and practice improvement. The Guildford DFJ area just has one local authority, which is Surrey. But Surrey is a really large council. It's got a population of over 1 million, and at the moment we get about 1,000 contacts a month to our front door.
Excellent, thanks, Jenny. And Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Lucas. I'm the practice development lead for the Wolverhampton DFJ area. My main role within the Trailblazer has been to implement a workforce development plan across the 6 local authorities that make up our area. The local authorities we've worked in are quite varied in terms of demographics, in terms of the experience level of the workforce as well. So that's been quite interesting.
Excellent, thanks, Beth. And if we just move on to the next slide, I'll just give you a brief overview as to what to expect from this session. Thank you. So we'll be hearing from both Beth and Jenny over the course of the next 35 to 40 minutes on workforce development. So we'll be talking about how you actually identify some of the skills gaps that might exist in the workforce, why training became such a big focus for Trailblazers in terms of tackling delay, which is the ambition of the Trailblazers project. And then we'll look through some of the package of training that was developed in both of the 2 regions. We'll talk a bit about how you actually make training accessible. So it's not just like a one-off type day situation, a one-off thing, but something that will have a lasting effect. When training should be commissioned and when you might be able to deliver things internally and how you go about doing that. And then finally, we'll think a bit about how actually it's so important to engage stakeholders outside of local authorities and across the family justice system in the region to develop that training offer. As I mentioned, please do use the Q&A function throughout. We'll pick up questions either sort of during the session or towards the end. So please do continue to send those through. We've got some things that we'd like to share with you and some kind of outputs and products that we will share. And then we'll also be bringing the slides down a bit on occasion too, so you can see us as we kind of have our conversation about some of these issues on the slide. So if we could just move on. So really in Wolverhampton, this is really the sort of starting point. So this that you can see on the screen is a survey or a snippet of a survey that was sent out across the region to help to identify the skills gap that existed across the workforce and sort of get a sense of what the levels of confidence in the staffing group was. So Beth, if I could just ask you to talk through this exercise with us, what kind of information did you get back? Did it throw up any particular surprises, and kind of what your reaction to that was?
Yeah, so as you said, Yannick, this was something I did right at the beginning after coming on board, and really I wanted to understand what the training needs of the workforce was. I was mindful that working across 6 different local authorities meant that people will have had very different training opportunities, so I wanted to know if the training needs were the same and what the greatest needs were. A big part of the survey was asking people to rate their confidence in various elements of pre-proceedings and care proceedings practice, and also indicate what they wanted to get out of training most, what things they wanted to be covered. I also wanted them to think about what, in addition to training, would help them to build the skills and confidence that they need. And a lot of people identified that shadowing and co-working opportunities were actually the most valuable things. In terms of what we found, we had quite a low response rate, which was a shame. But as we'd expect, the more experienced people were, the more confidence they had. But there was a huge amount of variability across the local authorities. Some of the local authorities that we've worked with have dedicated court teams. So day in, day out, they're doing this type of work, so their confidence is a lot higher. Whereas those local authorities that don't have dedicated court teams, the workforce generally were quite low in confidence in a lot of the areas we looked at. Overall, there were more people who said they were not confident or only a bit confident in most areas of the work than those who said they were very or quite confident. So overall, the workforce wasn't as confident as we might assume, and that included some quite experienced workers as well. There were especially low confidence in writing statements and care plans, and in some areas, writing parenting assessments was an area of very low confidence. Again, that might have been because of different training opportunities, but it helped us to see where we needed to target some of that training. It's been really helpful. It's given us a bit of a benchmark of how the workforce are feeling about court work, and we were able to then feed that back to the local authorities individually so that they can continue to address some of those needs post Trailblazer.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Beth. And actually, I was thinking as you were talking that you've sort of also identified one of the challenges with this particular topic about implementing a regional training plan, because you've touched on the fact that you've got different approaches in different local authorities across your region and different kind of skill sets and levels. So it's quite difficult to kind of, I guess, know where to pitch your training plan for an entire region. And we'll perhaps come on to that a little bit more when we talk about what that training plan actually looks like. But for now, we're just gonna we can bring the slides down because I wanted to talk to you both really about why you decided to take this as a regional approach to training as one of the ways in which you could tackle delay. And so I suppose my first question on that one really for you, Jenny, is kind of what are some of the ways in which a lack of training or a lack of skills, or as Beth's just touched on, a lack of confidence, how do those things in the workforce actually contribute to delay in the first place?
Yeah, I would say there are multiple and like overlapping ways that a lack of training or skills in your workforce can contribute to delays. So firstly, kind of linking in with what Beth has just spoken about, if we look broadly at like the quality of assessments and the quality of our statements and care plans, and we know that if you start proceedings with good quality work, it can make a real difference to the timeliness of your proceedings, but also the need to instruct any experts throughout those proceedings, which we know are one of the main reasons that we get delays in court. So in Surrey, we run separate training on writing social work, evidence, parenting assessments, and then we also commission training on parent assess and sexual abuse risk assessment. So all with the aim of increasing the quality of our work and reducing the need for experts. Kind of secondly, you can have like really specific gaps in knowledge or timescales or like specific processes in an area, and that can make a real difference when it comes to delay. So for example, in Surrey, there was some confusion over the processes for how social workers can instruct experts in pre-proceedings. So as we developed our training kind of internally and bespoke, we could look at those specific areas where there was a lack of knowledge. And often we found that it was really simple steps that can be quick wins in terms of improving the quality of our work and tackling delays. And finally, kind of looking at the confidence thing that you spoke about and Beth spoke about, the training that we ran in Surrey also specifically addressed the social work role in kind of making every hearing count. And the preparation needed for your hearing and giving oral evidence at your final hearing. So that training, like I said, more focused on the confidence of the social worker in the court arena. So we know that if you've got that confidence, you're more confident speaking to your legal colleagues, the guardian, for giving like really clear analysis of why your recommendations are what they are, and all of those things can also, contribute to tackling delay. So kind of in summary, it has the skills in the workforce plays a massive role in tackling delays in court proceedings.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jenny. And I suppose obviously we're towards the end of this project, and we're at the end of March now. So we've been doing this, and you both haven't, I know, been necessarily in post since the 1st of April, but we've had kind of like this year of delivering extensive training. And I think people will probably be interested to know whether or not you've seen any kind of impact, either on delay or just from what you're hearing. And I know obviously you don't always expect training to then have an immediate impact, but what kind of things you've kind of identified as early impacts so far? Jenny, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, so like you said, it is early days.
Yeah.
But in Surrey, we are seeing an improvement in the number of children, like in timescales in pre-proceedings. And because I work in just one local authority, I've been able to kind of do qualitative dip sampling of the children. And I can see that there's evidence of improved management oversight, planning, more creative thinking about those delays, and kind of that social work grip and understanding of where we're at in that process and the planning for it. We're also starting to see more preparation for when we are making applications to court, so less short notice hearings. Some of the training has only just rolled out, like in February and March, and we've got more training planned. So it is going to be longer term that we can really see, but the early signs are really positive.
Excellent. And Beth, bit in Wolverhampton, what kind of like the early impacts that you're seeing?
It's quite a similar story to Jenny, really. There's quite a lot of our training that we've only been rolling out the last couple of months, and it's ongoing into April as well. But some of the feedback we've had so far from legal teams is that they're noticing a difference in not having to outsource assessments to independent social workers. And that was a real goal of ours through the Trailblazer, was to try and reduce that reliance, because that obviously reduces the cost in care proceedings and reduces delay. We've also had some positive feedback about work that's been done using the resolutions approach, and we're in a much better position now to carry out that work within the local authorities, and we can front load that and get ahead of it rather than having to wait for it to be court ordered and then outsource that to an ISW.
Yeah, and that was certainly something that the area had identified kind of pre-Trailblazers as an issue which is causing delay, was the kind of over-reliance possibly on the use of expert assessments. So that's, I guess, one of the things that we really hope to achieve with the training program. But we've talked about, training hypothetically, but it'd be obviously really good to talk about what you guys have actually been delivering. So we do have a slide that we can bring up, which just gives a bit of an overview on the training packages that you've been implementing across your region. So Beth, if I start with you, if you could just take us through the training that has been delivered in Wolverhampton and kind of talk to us a little bit about what the skills that those trainings provide to social workers that really best equip them to then deal with court work. Because as you mentioned, in some local authorities, you've got those courts teams who are very experienced. In other local authorities, you have people that are less experienced. So if you could just give us an overview of what you've been up to in Wolverhampton.
Absolutely. We've had quite a varied training offer, I think, in Wolverhampton. It was mentioned earlier that Parent Assess has been something that I think all the Trailblazer areas have looked at, and we've managed to train over 200 people in completing Parent Assess assessments, which has been a real achievement. And that means that across all the local authorities in the area, they can now be done in-house, which is fantastic. Alongside that, we've also had workshops on Parent Assess for managers, so that they're better equipped to support those assessments and quality assure them, but also workshops for support workers and family time supervisors. So we've got other people who are now feeding into our assessments more, which is really helpful. We've trained 13 people to deliver the Parent Assess training so that that can continue following the end of the Trailblazer as well. Confidence in assessments was something we really wanted to address. So not just social workers' confidence in their own assessments, but other people's confidence in the assessments that are being produced. So to try and really strengthen those assessment skills, not just on parent assess assessments, but assessment in general, we've offered just under 200 spaces on a 2-day how to do a parenting assessment course. With that, we've targeted it initially at newly qualified social workers and those who are a bit less experienced and need a bit more support around their assessment skills. But we've had really good feedback on that, even from those who are really quite experienced in assessments. They've got a lot from it. It was noted early on as well that we struggle with assessing risk where there's been sexual abuse. So we've offered training around preventing sexual harm, and that includes a tool for assessing the risk of someone reoffending where there's been intrafamilial sexual abuse. We've had training on the resolutions approach to assessment and practice with complex disputed child abuse cases. We've also offered training around doing sibling assessments and undertaking CPRs. And the final piece of training that hasn't yet been rolled out, but will continue to be available indefinitely following the end of the Trailblazer, is an online pre-proceedings and care proceedings course. So that's something that I've developed alongside a barrister and covers all aspects of pre-proceedings and care proceedings work, and includes examples of work as well. So overall, the training will have covered most parts of pre-proceedings and care proceedings, but we've had a real focus on strengthening assessment skills. So we've looked at a couple of different models of assessment. So we've got parent assess and the resolutions approach, but also those core assessment skills. Because what we really want to be doing is making defensible recommendations to court and producing high quality work to support those recommendations.
Great, thanks for that overview, Beth. We'll come back to later that bit you mentioned about the work that you've been doing with barristers, because we're really keen to talk about this not just being about local authorities, training local authorities out, but how we work, across the system. But Jenny, I'd give you an opportunity to talk about what you've been up to in Surrey. And I'm also really interested to hear kind of from what you've heard from the staff that have actually been receiving the training. So is there anything that's had particularly good feedback? And I suppose in a sense, does that suggest that was obviously like a significant training need? So yeah, anything on the feedback from your the staff in your area as well would be really interested to hear.
Yeah, thanks, Janik. So in Surrey, the main package of training we delivered was developed in-house, and it was 9 bite-sized training sessions, which went from the legal gateway meeting all the way to the final hearing. And I'll talk a bit more about them on the next slide. But the session where we got the most positive feedback, I mean, they all were really well received, which kind of just showed a thirst for wanting this knowledge, and social workers really wanted and want to, improve their court skills and have more confidence. But where we got particularly positive feedback was the session on the final hearing and about giving oral evidence. I think this is because it's an area that individual social workers might not do that frequently in terms of, giving that evidence in court, but also it's understandably something that they're worried and anxious about, so want to be able to be, as confident as they can be. We also got really good feedback on some adoption training that we did, which spoke about writing good quality child permanence reports. So I developed that with our permanency manager in Surrey, and she was really kind of able to bring to life the importance of the information that you put in that child permanence report. So it kind of showed the importance of, when you're developing the training, using the skills and the knowledge that you've got within your local authority, to build it and to make sure you've kind of got the best people sharing that information. The newly qualified training that I completed last week, so that was 3 days, and that was all face-to-face. That was really different from the other training that we've delivered in Surrey, and that got really positive feedback. Someone said it was the best training they'd had as part of the ASYE. So that was really lovely to hear. But I think it just identified that it was a gap, giving social workers the knowledge in terms of court skills, working in pre-proceedings and in court. We hadn't addressed that previously in the newly qualified year. And then we had the expectation that those social workers after their first year in practice would be ready to go. And, they wouldn't be, because they wouldn't necessarily have the experience, and it would depend on the team that they were in. But this way we know that all our newly qualified social workers have been given training to build their confidence, and also so they know where to get the support in the future. So yeah, that's been really positive as well.
Great, thanks. I can see that there's questions coming in. So some of them I'll just really quickly cover. So the one on who delivers the training, we'll actually talk a little bit about when training is delivered by external providers and when it's internal, but the answer to that question is a combination of things. So parent assess and things like that are obviously delivered by external providers, and in some cases Beth and Jenny have been working with people to develop and deliver training, and yeah, in other cases it's been externally provided. So it's a combination, and we will talk a little bit more about that. But I just want to move us on to the next slide, because one of the things that I know, particularly in Wolverhampton, because I was involved in those conversations, and I'm sure was also the case for you in Surrey, Jenny. But when you're doing training, and you've got this year where you're developing these training packages, you want to make sure that it's not just to benefit those people who are in that workforce at that moment, but thinking about how you actually make training accessible. If I join your organization a day after a training's been delivered, do I just lose out on that learning? And so that's been a really key point of what we've been doing over the last year is thinking about sustainability and accessibility. So it would be really great to hear from you, Jenny, on this, because I know you've been busy developing a series of these 1-minute guides, which you can see a screenshot of on this slide. If you could just tell us a little bit more about the sort of idea behind the 1-minute guides and what you've created those for.
Yeah, so in Surrey, like I explained previously, the bulk of the training that we offered was delivered or developed internally and delivered by me, along with mostly a solicitor colleague, but also some other colleagues, like I just mentioned, for the adoption training. And all of those trainings we delivered online, but they've also all been recorded. And all of them had a 1-minute guide which accompanied them. And the 1-minute guides just contain the most important information for social workers from that training session. So each of the training sessions were only about 30 minutes, but either you missed a session or you just wanted to be able to quickly get the most important information. That was the main reason behind the 1-minute guide. I know that some social workers have made their own folders on their computers containing all the 1-minute guides. Some teams, like in their Teams chats, they have them all saved there, so they all know how to access them really quickly. Secondly, thinking more broadly about the accessibility, and kind of linking in with a 1-minute guide, it's just a recognition that everyone works in different ways. So all of the trainings that are listed on the screen there, those are the bite-sized trainings that we delivered online, but then also we recorded. And so all of those recordings are now saved on a separate SharePoint site. So that site has the video recordings of the training, the 1-minute guides, some other resources such as like flowcharts, some best practice examples. And so whatever your level of experience, whatever time you've got available, and however you learn, there are resources that are available to you. So yeah, the sustainability of the training and making sure that the workforce can access something that will help them long term was something that we really wanted to achieve when we started the project.
Yeah, sure. And understandably, there's been questions, a couple of questions. I know one was around specifically online pre-proceedings training that you were referring to, Beth, and another question about the 1-minute guides, about making those available to others. So we have been collecting resources throughout the year that we've been sharing for Trailblazers through our microsite on our website, and we are planning to make that more broadly available, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the day. So do keep an eye out for those. There certainly will be some resources that have been developed by Trailblazers that will be available for others to look at and adapt and do whatever you guys want to do with them. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the day. Beth, I just wanted to come to you to tell us a little bit about how you've thought about accessibility in Wolverhampton, and telling us just a little bit about how you've thought about ensuring that trainings are made accessible across all 6 of your local authorities. I'll come to you on that one.
Yeah, it's been a real challenge for us. I think the biggest part of a challenge has been because we've commissioned training, which means we've been quite restricted in how it's delivered. So it's been either full days or 2-day training courses. We did toy with the idea of having it online, but I think sometimes it's quite hard to engage with training for a full day online. We all get distracted by emails and people aren't going to get as much from it when it's a full day. So we decided to have it in person. And we know that pulling people into training means that they're coming away from their day-to-day activities, and that puts a real pressure on services. So one of the things that we did to try and address that was to make sure that every training date we had a mix of people from all 6 local authorities to try and reduce the pressure on any individual local authority at a time. And there's been some really positive feedback around that. And someone had asked about unexpected benefits of the training. One of the unexpected benefits is the networking opportunities that people have had. So the feedback that I've been getting is that they've been meeting people from other local authorities, learning about how things are done differently in local authorities, and really learning from each other as well as the trainer. The area that we're covering is quite large geographically. So we've been mindful about training venues. We've spread those out across the area so that those who can't travel as far don't need to. But then we've also looked at other resources alongside the face-to-face training. So we've developed toolkits, we've recorded podcasts, and all of those will be uploaded to a website that will be accessible to everyone in the DFJ area. Unfortunately, we can't make it public facing at the request of some of those who have been recorded. The online training, that will be purchasable, unfortunately, not free for everyone, but purchasable to all local authorities across the country. And that's something that could be accessed whenever and wherever and can be done in really short bites as people want to do it as well.
Excellent, thanks, Beth. We'll just bring the slides down again. So a couple of questions. And you did mention, Beth, that it's difficult to be online for training all day, but you forgot to mention that the Trailblazers National Learning Conference is obviously the exception to that rule, because we've had some great sessions with speakers today. I'm just kidding, but just wanted to have a little chat. So we've talked a little bit about how your approaches have been slightly different in terms of when you sort of have externally commissioned. You've mentioned some examples, Beth, and then a lot of kind of internal development and delivery, which definitely done some of in Wolverhampton, but Jenny, a lot of the guides that you've produced, like a lot of the internal delivery of training. So first question on that really is for you, Beth. So you've taken that approach around kind of working with external training providers. And I just wondered if you could share any advice to other areas that are on the call about how you make sure that you're really getting what you need from external training providers and you're not getting kind of like cut and pasted training delivered that's been delivered lots of places and might not necessarily meet your needs.
Yeah, I've definitely had to learn as I've gone along with this. It's a completely new world to me. The biggest piece of advice I can give is to be really clear on what you want the training to achieve and discuss this with the trainer beforehand. Some of the training I've been able to attend it before commissioning it, so I've had an idea of whether or not it will meet our needs. Where this has been really good is the how to do a parenting assessment training. So I attended that training prior to commissioning it, and also got people from the other local authorities, just a few, to attend so we could discuss whether it would be useful and how to then pitch that. But I'm in regular communication with the trainer. We've been able to share some of our assessment templates from the different local authorities, so he's tailored the training for us, which has been really helpful. Another thing that's been important is taking on board feedback from people that have attended the training. So with one of the trainings we commissioned, there was quite a lot of feedback afterwards about areas that people still lacked confidence. They weren't really sure how to use what they'd learned. So we were able to request further workshops to address some of those areas. And then with the online training, I've been working in partnership with a barrister and another social worker to develop the training. So that's very much been co-produced between us. And we've had a really clear shared vision of what we want that training to look like, which has been great.
Yeah, which leads us on really nicely to kind of the sort of final kind of part of the agenda, which was around working with wider system stakeholders, because obviously you're both coming from a sort of local authority perspective, and although you know the Trailblazers, it was local authorities that bid to be part of the Trailblazers program. It was never because it's local authorities that have all the answers, to all of the difficult questions when it comes to this. So engaging stakeholders across the system has obviously always been really necessary and really important. So Jenny, kind of question for you, really, I suppose. Could you tell us a little bit more about the ways that you've worked with stakeholders kind of outside your local authority to deliver training to staff?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, working with partners across the family justice system has been like an important additional arm of our training package for social workers. So this was particularly relevant for the training we developed for our newly qualified social workers. So within that training, I also linked in with CAFCAS and the service manager from CAFCAS, and with a judge. So with both of them, I completed a video, which I then shared at the training. So the CAFCAS service manager spoke about like the role of CAFCAS, the importance of the relationship between the guardian and the social worker, what guardians want to see from social work assessments. The judge spoke about the importance of pre-proceedings work, what a good statement looks like to them, and what the courts want to see when we make an application. So not only was it really important for like newly qualified social workers to hear from the stakeholders about what they wanted to see, and kind of reinforcing a lot of the same messages that we were sharing. But also for our newly qualified social workers, it helps to kind of humanize and demystify those other stakeholders that they might not have had any experience working with before. So in addition, if we're thinking about kind of engaging all parts of the system, the training package that I developed, I jointly developed with an advocate in our childcare team in the legal department. So that the training looked obviously at the social work perspective, but also obviously the legal perspective. We developed the training for social workers, but our colleagues in the legal team also attended, and that was like an unexpected benefit. Like Beth was saying earlier, that colleagues in the legal team spoke about how much they learned about the social work role, things they weren't aware of that we had to do. And now it's on the compulsory training list for all new starters, both for frontline social workers and for colleagues in the legal department. And finally, if we're thinking about engaging the wider system, we also deliver presentations to the wider LFJB community, not only sharing the work we're doing, but also thinking about what part they can play in terms of tackling delays. So parents, representatives, guardians, and the judiciary, and actions that we hope they can take forward, so that we're all working together to improve outcomes for children.
Great, yeah, thanks, Jenny. One of the questions that we had earlier was about getting input from other parts of the system into kind of reflecting on other training needs and what training gaps that they'd identified. And so that kind of leads me into a question for you, Beth, because one of the things that has occurred sort of by chance, I guess, in Wolverhampton over the past 12 months is that we've had 3 different DFJs during the time that we've been doing this project. All of them like really engaged and really supportive of the Trailblazer, which has been incredibly helpful. And we've recently had training delivered by Her Honour Judge Carter, who's the DFJ in Wolverhampton. And it seems that this kind of training, which when it's sort of delivered with or delivered by the judiciary, is really effective and it's really beneficial. And people respond really well to it. Could you just give us a bit of an insight as to why that you think that's so important and effective to work with the judiciary on training?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you say, I think it's been really well received. We've had some great feedback on it. I think one of the biggest benefits of it is having complete clarity. There's no ambiguity there. It's very clear from Judge Carter what we need to be doing, what the judges need from us, and everybody has had exactly the same message. So, the people who attended the training ranged from your newly qualified social workers right through to your senior managers. So there's no risk of that message getting watered down. Everybody knows exactly where the message has come from, and everyone's been told the exact same thing. So that's been really helpful. And that was across all 6 local authorities at the same time as well. So that was, yeah, incredibly useful. Also, they've got oversight of what's happening in various local authorities and not just working with one. So they can see these patterns, they can kind of get an idea of what's needed across all of the areas, and what messages need to be given. I think also there's a lot of credibility when the message is given by a judge. People really kind of sit up and listen to what's being said. Whereas sometimes when it comes from a manager or from somebody else, it can be easy to just kind of go, yeah, okay, I know timescales are important. But when it comes from a judge, people take it very seriously.
Yeah. I think it was Judge Carter who had said in a meeting previously that, these things are two ways. It's not just about local authorities learning from judges or learning from CAFCAS colleagues, whatever, but it's about what you can teach to other parts of the system as well. And for the judiciary, it's really incredibly important for them to know what pressures that you're under as social workers, and what the expectations are, and to kind of, it's a two-way thing. It's not just about learning from the judiciary. We've had a bunch of questions. We've got 3 or 4 more minutes to go through. One of them I think is particularly interesting because it's sort of about that accessibility, but encouraging attendance and taking up the training offer with a competing workload demand. There's been a lot of training delivered across both your areas in the last year, and we also talk about high caseloads being as a contributor to delay. So it's balancing that, obviously really difficult. And the person in the question said, is it mandatory? And I don't think there's been any kind of mandatory training. But Jenny, would you like to just start us off with a response to that? How you've kind of balanced those things?
Yeah, so that was one of the main reasons that we made the bulk of our training bite-sized in Surrey. So the trainings were between like 30 minutes and an hour. They were the same time every week. I think because I was only working in one local authority, logistically, some of it was easier. But I just sent out my training as a Teams invite so that if people wanted to attend, they only had to accept the Teams invite. So I thought of all the ways to reduce the barriers to social workers attending. And that way we did get, really high attendance for our trainings. So yeah, by making it short, by making it so that our sessions, you didn't need to have attended the one before in order, they all stood in isolation as well. So if you couldn't attend them all, then it didn't matter. In terms of being compulsory, when we delivered them online, they weren't compulsory. Now that they have been recorded as webinars, it's going to be an expectation that new staff have it as part of their induction training. But at that point, they won't be working with a full caseload because they'll be, inducting into their role in Surrey. And all of them altogether are only about 3.5 hours. So it's not, that's half a day's work, isn't it? Just to get an overview of how we do court work in Surrey. So yeah, that's not too big an ask.
Thank you. We've got one question specifically on Parent Assess, and feedback that you've had possibly from staff or on Parent Assess templates from parents in terms of being able to understand the outcome of assessments, and also from practitioners as well. Is that something that you've come across, or have you heard kind of feedback from staff around using the Parent Assess templates that come from Parent Assess as part of that assessment framework? Beth, your spot.
So I've not had any feedback from parents, so unfortunately I can't share that, and not a huge amount that's come to me anyway around the template. There's a couple of different approaches. When you say template, I'm not sure whether you mean the method by which you input the data to inform the report, or whether you mean the template of the report itself. But I'll assume it's the inputting of the data, because that's where people tend to get a bit stuck. And there's a couple of different approaches to it. One requires a subscription to the Parent Assess software, which we haven't paid for as part of the Trailblazer, because there's a downloadable Excel spreadsheet that does basically the same thing that you can get access to once you've been trained. Once people have been have worked out how to use it, which they are showing how to use it on the training, I think it's relatively straightforward. It is, I think that the approach as a whole parent assess, it's a great approach, but it can be a little bit more timely than writing up a normal parenting assessment, because you are inputting scores and generating tables and stuff that go into your report. But no, I can't say I've had a great deal of feedback. I've had questions, but I haven't had anyone come to me and say, we really don't like using this.
Thanks, Beth. That takes us to time. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And thanks to you, Jenny, and thank you to you, Beth. It's been really brilliant to hear about your approach to developing these training offers with partners across the system. I hope